Welcome back to A Writer's Mind. I'm your host, Delshri Spinner, and I finally got some more writing done. Hooray! It's summer break, so I got a million projects to do and tons of things on my list, but I definitely have writing on my plans for summer. It was a crazy school year, lots of just chaos and stuff, and so I'm really trying to focus in this summer to get into some good writing habits so I can actually make some progress and get something done. So I did get done the rest of chapter 6, and I managed to write chapter 7 as well. So it was a good writing afternoon yesterday after I had gotten some other stuff done and before I lost all energy after spending not 3 whole days, but over the course of the week, 3 long mornings trying to, I'd say prune is a very light description of one of the trees in my backyard is kind of dying, and I'm trying to stop it from dying. It had a whole bunch of dead on it, so poor thing now looks like just a skeleton of what it was, but needed to get rid of all of that dead crap to hopefully save what's left and let it kind of grow itself back. So I was exhausted from that, but I was able to get some writing done since I couldn't really do anything else physical. My body was worn out and quite sore today. So I am taking a break from tree business and recording what I was able to get done, and hopefully I'll get some more writing done this afternoon as well. So chapter 6, I had started out, I'd gotten a portion of this written a while ago, and then I kind of got stuck because I wasn't totally sure where I wanted to go as far as showing what the girls are up to and where I wanted to kind of draw that curtain. And I really had to think about it for a while. I talked about it with Chris and just kind of like the realisticness of the setting, how they would operate within that kind of stuff, how to show the girls, I guess, like expertise at what they're doing to show the reader, like they've been doing this for a while. They kind of have their systems down. They've got different routines and rhythms, and depending on kind of how they're coming into a situation, depends on how they play it. So I'd gotten up to a point where they're kind of interacting with some of these men. They stumbled into a conference kind of after party type of thing. It was just, they had just picked a place that they were going to go, and it happened that there was this after party type of thing going on. And I had kind of written like they're chatting people up, filling things out, kind of making their way to a group that they've kind of set their sights on. And kind of how those conversations would go, I was a little unsure of, and I ended up going back and making some changes to the early part of the chapter. And I probably still will. This will be a chapter that I'll work on again later, but like right now I just need to get stuff down and I'll kind of fine-tune things later. But I added in the beginning kind of as they come into the room, it's not just men, that there's a group of women and kind of like comparing themselves to them and like, are they going to be competition? And I adjusted some of the conversations and then had the girls, they're kind of feeling people out throughout the crowd, but then they split up and go to different areas of the bar to kind of signal that like they are available for people's interest at that point. And kind of, like I said, I'm still not sure about like the conversations. I will come back and look at these later. I think I'll need to do a little bit more research, maybe look up some documentaries for people who are in the sex worker business and just what that might look like, because I don't know. But I want it to come off as realistic, but I'm willing to take a little bit of license to show what needs to be shown in this chapter as far as both the girls and their routines and their skill level at this. I had originally thought that this would kind of be more complicated than it was, and I was debating how much I wanted to show. Is there going to be any detail of the actual like acts that they're performing with these men? And as I was kind of getting through these conversations, I was still a little bit on the fence of whether I needed to go into any specific detail. And, there's 2 things that kind of come into play. One, like I write under my name. I also teach high school, so there's a consideration there of the content that I want in my books at this point, and just kind of the consequences or impacts of, getting too overly graphic with things, which I'm not usually like, I don't get too terribly graphic. Like I think there's been some here and there where I've gotten a little bit more descriptive. But on top of that, kind of where I settled was just that I didn't really want that to be the focus of the book. Like, the point isn't that they're going in and doing these different things with these men. The point is why they're doing these things and what's going on in those situations, what has led to them being involved in this kind of lifestyle. And getting into graphic details about the actual acts wasn't really going to serve the story, and I think it would kind of distract from the point. Like, this is not a romance. I mean, there are romantic elements, but like, this is not a good situation. Like, I don't want to glorify what they're doing in any way. I want this to be clear that these are decisions that she's making out of desperation, and that anything that kind of comes from that, those consequences entailed with these decisions, are snowballing and pushing her forward into everything that's going to happen later in the book. So it's kind of where I settled as far as what's going to be the graphic content level of this book. And I think there will be situations later in the book where there may be some description, because it's going to lead to situations where there are immediate consequences with the men that they target and pick up, such as, maybe like one of them doesn't want to end up paying, or there's kind of a confrontation over what they will or won't do, or something like that. At that point, I may give some descriptive detail. Again, like, I'm not going to get overly graphic into it, but if it serves the story, I may include a little bit more description of what they're doing, but to the point of just so that the reader can orient themselves and know what's going on in the situation. So hopefully that comes across. Again, I'll kind of reevaluate as I go. If I get to the end, and send it out to alphas and betas, and the balance of that is not setting right, I'll make some adjustments at that point. But so far with this chapter, that's kind of where I left the end of chapter 6. They interact with the group and kind of go over to the bar, and one man kind of follows her over there, and she gives them the option of like, is this a solo thing, or my friend is available to join? And she's kind of wanting Arya to be involved for safety and just kind of her state of mind. Like, she's had a really lousy day and just kind of wants that extra person there in her corner. So she kind of nudges him toward that. They discuss pricing discreetly, and then I kind of leave it at they go up to the room with him and close the door at that point. Because this is the point of this chapter, is to show their comfort and their skill level with what they're doing, not to actually get into the exact ins and outs of what they're doing. So that's kind of where I ended chapter 6. Again, like, I just felt like that served the point of the chapter more than just adding in a bunch of sexual content that really wouldn't move the story forward, because I don't need the reader to know exactly, where their skill lies with these men. That's not important to the story. I think the manipulation, the targeting, the way that they handle the situation is more the point of what's going on and whether the reader is clear on that. Like, this is not a new thing. This is not a one-time thing. This is something that they're very experienced with. They know what they're doing. They kind of make it a quick in and out, although not as quick as they plan for it to be, which leads into chapter 7. Now, with chapter 7, I wasn't totally sure where I was going to go with this chapter when I started it. I just was like, I still have some headspace to write, so we're just going to jump in and see what happens. Because I'd had in chapter 6 several times that she mentions, like, I have a time limit, I have to be home by curfew, this has got to be quick. And so Penelope has made that clear several times while she's with Arya, and Arya's like, yeah, no problem, like, we'll do it, it's fine. And then I kind of open chapter 7 with, I was feeling like I've shown kind of the relationship between Penelope and Arya, and, that they have a romantic and sexual relationship. There's also some sense, I'll get into this a little bit more later, of kind of a mentor-mentee relationship. The hows and whys of that will come up later. But basically, like, Arya is the more experienced person in everything that they're doing, and she's been teaching and guiding Penelope as they've gone through this. So I've established that side of the relationship, kind of just as I started writing, literally the first sentence of this chapter, an idea kind of like solidified of what I wanted to show and where I wanted to go with this chapter. And basically, kind of what I wanted to establish after showing those other parts of their relationship is that there's also a less, I don't even want to say like healthy or positive, because really their whole relationship, like, I mean, none of it's very healthy or positive. But it can kind of seem like that. Like she's helping her, she's there for her, she's a support for her in a lot of ways. But I wanted to start giving some hints about some of the more unhealthy sides of their relationship outside of like just the craziness of what they're doing and just like who Arya is. But I wanted it to be subtle. And I also, as I started getting into this chapter, I realized it was also an opportunity to show a little bit more about who Penelope is and how she handles being manipulated. I've hopefully to this point like shown a lot of where she has her strengths in kind of maintaining a status quo as best she can with her parents and kind of working around their insanity, her strengths at school and different things, and kind of standing up to and getting into the argument with the pastor. So I needed to show kind of where she's not as strong in this chapter. And, hopefully I accomplished that. We'll see what people think when someone actually reads this. So basically, I start off the chapter with them rushing out of the hotel and kind of quickly making their way back down after they've had this encounter with the guy. And now they're really trying to get back to the car. And so I kind of start off the chapter with a sense of panic of they were supposed to kind of be like keeping track of the time. And, depending on who was doing what in the room, the other person was keeping an eye on the time so that they could get Penelope home before her curfew. And I indicate that Arya was kind of the last person in charge of watching the clock and got distracted or, misjudged things or whatever. And so now they're rushing. Penelope's a bit panicked that they're not going to make it on time. And, Arya kind of brushes it off and makes excuses of like, oh, she was distracted by Penelope and watching her. And, don't worry, like she'll get them home on time. Like it's not that big of a deal. Like, calm down, basically kind of an attitude, although she doesn't say that. But I try to set that tone of like panic on Penelope's side of things and Arya not taking it as seriously, even though she knows better than anyone else in Penelope's life what her parents are like and what extremes they'll go to when they feel like they have been wronged. So I kind of, like I said, I didn't really actually have a plan for this chapter before I started it, but within like the first 2 lines, I was like, okay, this is what I need to do here. So basically, they're rushing out of the hotel, they're getting to the car, they have this portion of a scene where it's like, Arya becomes a street racer, basically, and she's just, jetting through downtown Denver to try to get back out to the suburbs where they both live and to where Penelope left her car kind of parked in front of a classmate's house, saying that that's where she was at for her study group. And, like I said, Arya's not taking it as seriously, where Penelope is panicking. And she gets her back to her car at 10:55 and her curfew is 11 because that's when her mother's going to be home. And she already knows she's kind of in for some punishment because of the argument with the pastor. So she really doesn't want to miss curfew and then have, that compounded. So she, is in a rush while Arya's like driving like a bat out of hell. She can't really change her clothes. So it's not until they get to the suburb areas where Arya is forced to slow down that she can kind of unbuckle and start changing her clothes and wiping off her makeup and all of that so she can show back up at home the same way she left, looking like she was about to go to a study group, not to go out and solicit men. So the first part of the chapter has a lot of like panic and intensity in it. Well, at least on Penelope's side, Arya stays fairly calm the whole time and is just kind of like, don't worry, like it's fine, I'll get you there. But with the added time of Penelope having to get her stuff, get into her car, and then drive I can't remember how much I said, the few blocks over to her own house. She does not quite make it home in time. She's like 1 or 2 minutes late. But that is enough to set off her father. He's already heard from the mom about the pastor conversation, and he enjoys punishing his children. So he's kind of eager to dish out some punishment. And we see in this where we've seen before where Penelope doesn't fight with her parents. She doesn't resist them. She goes into automatic survival mode of like, yes, sir, okay, she just agrees and does what she's told, because there's no point with them of arguing, and this is how the best way she's found to survive things. So she gets home late. Her dad is instantly on the offensive, and she does not try to counter him. She just, apologizes and just kind of prepares for herself for whatever he's about to throw at her. And he's kind of taking off his belt. He's getting ready to whip her, and the mom comes home. And I had kind of debated, as I was getting to this part, whether this was just going to be an encounter between her and the father, or if I wanted to bring the mom into it at all. And again, this was kind of a chapter where it was just like, in that moment, it was like, no, I think the mom should show up. And part of that was because, I had set up earlier that 11 o'clock was the curfew, because that's when her mom usually gets home from her shift at the hospital. And the dad really, he doesn't want to deal with it. He's been at home with the kids for the evening while the mom was working, which he doesn't appreciate to begin with, because, he's kind of one of those that it's like, the kids are not my job. And so he's already kind of in a bad mood anytime that the mom has to work. But I wanted to show kind of their different responses to the situation and like what really sets them off, because it's not the same things. They don't have the same perspective and values, even though they've come from this same background. They have very different goals. The mom has like her mental health issues, which make her even more unstable. But I found that this was a good opportunity to really contrast between the two parents and show that to the reader without giving any explanation for it here. It's obviously in Penelope's point of view, but it's her dealing with their neurotic thoughts and their instability in that moment. So the dad is about to take off his belt to punish her for showing up late, and then the mom arrives home. And she is already super pissed off about how she behaved with the pastor. And then she realizes, if she's about to be beaten, it's because she also missed curfew. So at first she's there, she's going to witness this. And then she's, kind of in that mindset of like, you're going to get your physical punishment first, and then she's going to add on for how badly things went with the pastor. And things kind of shift because I was thinking, what would compound this situation even further? She's late. She's had this big confrontation with the pastor after the mom sent her there to, be counseled and fixed. So things are already bad, but I really wanted to show readers why Penelope is doing all of these crazy, desperate things. It's not just, she lives with controlling parents and that sucks. Like, no, that would be tolerable. She could get through that, but this is why she is so desperate to get away from them and to get her siblings away from them. The dad instructs her, he wants to inflict maximum damage as he's whipping her with the belt. So he tells her to lower her jeans, and Penelope was rushing to change clothes back into, her study gear. And she is rushing so much that she does not change her underwear. And so they see this, in their mind, slutty, provocative underwear that she's wearing. And the mom flips out and just loses it. But she's still not, she is physically violent. She slaps her, but then she turns it back over to the father because he's the main physical disciplinarian. But she eggs it on. And so I kind of take it to where like Penelope kind of just retreats inside her own head to get through it as she's being beaten. And then they basically like leave her there on the floor. They completely turn their backs on her and are just like, that's it. Like, you mean nothing at this point. So she is kind of just like left on the floor there. And I had considered ending the chapter there, but it felt unfinished, even though this chapter was getting a little bit long. I want to say, I think it ended up being around 2,700 words, which I've been doing shorter chapters with this one. I don't want like these, gargantuan chapters that are going to take 20, 30 minutes to read. I want to keep the pacing moving with shorter chapters. But this one just didn't feel quite finished with leaving her on the floor there. And again, these last two chapters were really just kind of opening up opportunities to show more about the secondary characters and their relationships with Arya, the good and the bad side of it. So I kind of thought, like, as she's laying there, this has obviously been disruptive to the whole household. They're screaming at Penelope. She's doing her best not to, show how much they're hurting her and, cry out or yell and scream or anything like that. But obviously, like the other children in the house, they know something's going on. They can hear it. They're scared. And so I kind of debated which sibling would be the one to come down and help her. And my first thought was Timothy, because he's just really soft-hearted, and he, in the previous scene that he's a part of, you see that about him. He does not have he hasn't built up the anger yet. He's still in the scared phase of living in this household and just being like, I'm sorry, I'll do this. I'll make it up. And, when he's talking about homework in the first chapter, and he's just like, I'm trying to catch up. Like, it's okay. He tries to avoid punishment by pleasing as much as possible. So my first thought was to go to him, but he is also fairly young. And he's scared of this household. He's scared of living there. He's scared of his parents. So I was kind of like, well, I don't know that he would actually have the bravery to come out of his room at that point and go down to try to help his sister, which led me to Laurel. And I thought, you know what, she is in a stage with her parents of resistance and fighting back, and, consequences be damned. Like, she's just not putting up with it, even though she's also terrified of them and doesn't want to be punished. But she's developed enough strength where she's pushing back in ways that she feels like she can do semi-safely. Like, she is still punished, but she's kind of found a balance of resisting without, being beaten to death by her parents, basically. So I settled on that because I was like, I think like Timothy would be too scared to come out of his room at this point. But Laurel is going to have a little bit more inner strength, and she's been put through some of these punishments, not to the same level as Penelope, but she knows after whatever she's been able to hear from her bedroom upstairs, she knows that Penelope is not going to be in a good state. So I decided to go with her, that she's the one who, it's not right away. She waits for things to settle down to make sure her parents are not going to find her and come out. And it's kind of vague. In Penelope's point of view, she's just holding very still, trying to deal with the pain. And then her sister comes down to help her, and it shows, hopefully, my goal is to show that Laurel does have this element of strength, but she doesn't have the confidence or just, the physical ability to stand up, to do anything more than what she's doing. But she recognizes this is a horrible situation. And I kind of hint that, like, she sees Penelope as their way out. Whether that's, she has no idea what Penelope's planning, and that might just be like, hey, the second you turn 18, get out of the house and, come live with me. Even if that's like her only thought, she has the sense that Penelope is their way out. That's the only way that they're going to get out of the situation that they're in. So some of it is, it's obviously she cares about her sister, she loves her, and she wants to help her. But there's also this level of, well, I have to help, keep her alive and save her. Otherwise, what's going to happen to us if they beat her to death? And hopefully kind of showing, because Laurel and Timothy, neither of them have had much page time yet. But I do want the characters or the readers to know them enough to be concerned about them, to have compassion for them, to understand their relationship with Penelope, and see some of the reasoning behind all of the horrible things that Penelope is going to do in this book. I need to develop her relationship with them a little bit more. And this seemed like a good opportunity to do that. To give a moment for Laurel to show her strength in the face of also being really scared and afraid for her future, but really kind of like building in that like she's finding her way through it as best she can. She doesn't have a plan or a path. She needs her sister for that, but she has some strength that's going to be important to the story. So basically, I mean, she comes down, she helps her get her up to bed. She shows that she's willing to take these risks to help her sister. And then I do give one little moment where, Timothy basically, like, he just peeks his head out and he, just to make sure that Penelope's still alive. He just needs to know that she's alive. And he's obviously been crying. They've both been very upset, Laurel and Timothy. Like, they were both crying at one point, but Laurel has kind of composed herself before she comes down. But Timothy is still crying. He peeks out just to make sure that she's actually alive, and then she tells him to go back to bed, and he disappears. He's like, okay, you're alive. That's the best I can expect in that moment, and he hides himself again, because that's the best defense he has at this point, is he's like kind of pleasing his parents as much as possible and hiding. And then I kind of wrap up the chapter, just Laurel offers before she leaves to see if she can find her some pain medication, which is not going to be anything useful, because they're pretty, I give a little bit of hint, even though like the mom is a nurse, but she's still very against modern medicine in things that like ease comfort. So Penelope makes a comment that, like maybe there's some ibuprofen in the house, but that's not going to do her a whole lot of good. And so she tells Laurel, like, no, don't take any more risk. Like, go back to bed. I'll be fine. And then she carefully, she's in a lot of pain, reaches under her nightstand where she has taped some pills that she has stolen from some John that they've interacted with at some point. And she takes the pills and basically just like falls on her bed. And the only reason I give some internal thought here that she's taking the pills, she doesn't want to. She has them as a backup. She doesn't like being unaware or unable to respond because, she just never knows when her parents are going to lose it and she might have to run or take the kids. But she also knows that since none of her injuries are going to be visible once she has clothes on, that her parents will expect her to get up and go to school the next morning. And so she needs to at least get some sleep and try to get through the pain so she can get out of bed and go to school, because there will not be any compassion for her in her parents' minds. She deserves it and it's her fault, so deal with it as you go to school. And they also know she's not going to tell any adults there. So hopefully with these last two chapters I've started giving some sense to the reader about these relationships between everybody and the true nature of her home life, and woven in some hints about how things might progress with Arya and where the family conflict is going to explode as things progress forward. There's tons more that I have planned to like layer in, but hopefully, like I said, my goal with these two that I realized as I was writing them was to just delve into those relationships a little bit more and show something new about the various characters and how that might play into the story later. And I think after this, these were, especially chapter 7, was a pretty heavy chapter. Like, I was kind of mentally beat after finishing it. I was like, ooh, okay, I need a break. It also doesn't help that I've been reading Art Spiegelman's Mouse, which is also just heart-crushing and really just so sad, but it's such a beautiful book at the same time. Highly recommend it if you haven't read it. But yeah, between those two things, between writing this chapter and reading Mouse, I need a little bit of a break from the darker things. So I think if I do get some writing done later today, I'm going to focus on the Karmic book and trying to finish chapter 2 on that one, because it is a bit lighter and there's some, in my head, what I have planned is some kind of silly interactions and still conflict, because they have to talk to, gosh, my mind's blanking, Cal. She's got to interact with Cal and kind of check in. So there'll be some conflict there, but I'm also going to have the person whose body that she has inhabited kind of break in and kind of take over their meeting, and that'll just be kind of a crazy interaction. So yeah, I need a little bit of a break from the darker, heavier stuff, so I'm gonna bounce over to the karmic story next. And maybe one of these days, one or both of these books will actually have some titles. Still no closer to figuring that out than I was before. But like I said, I am planning to really set aside some time to write and make some progress on both of these. I have more of a sense of where the Not Karmic book is going. So it's depending on how many breaks I need from writing in a pretty dark world. I might finish that one first just because I know where the story is going more, and I'm still a little bit vague on some of the main things that need to happen with the karmic story, but we'll see. I'm going to bounce back and forth between them. I'm headed over to the karmic one a little bit later today, and hopefully I can make some progress there. But I will be back soon with another episode once I have a minute to get something written and then recorded. So thank you for listening. Hopefully this glimpse inside the crazy process of me trying to separate these two stories and figure out what the heck I'm doing with them is in some way useful. Feel free to send me a message if it is, or if you just want to chat about your writing process. I'm pretty easy to find. Just search Del Cherie Spinner and yeah, drop me a message. I'm always happy to hear from readers and just hear about other people's writing processes too. I will be back soon. Thank you for listening. Rate, review, do all of those things. It does help the podcast get found by more people. And like I said, I just appreciate hearing from people and what they think. So I will be back soon. Bye.